Greetings, welcome to W12U1 General Process of Accreditation by NAAC. In the last unit, we understood the general process of accreditation by NBA. At the end of that unit, we did mention that in the subsequent unit we will be looking at the general process of accreditation by NAAC, but we numbered that unit as W11U5, but now the content is same, but the number has changed to W12U1, otherwise the content is same. So, the previous unit was W11U4. So, the outcome of this unit W12U1 is understand the general process of new accreditation framework by NAAC. We will briefly review the accreditation process prevailing till recently, the accreditation process of NAAC, but in 2004 NAAC announced a change in its framework based on the report of a committee constituted by Ministry of Education. We will discuss those issues in this unit and in the next unit. So, we will look at the general process of new accreditation framework by NAAC. NAAC, as we mentioned in the earlier units also, was established in 1994 as an autonomous institution of UGC. NAAC was entrusted with the responsibility of accrediting higher education institutions. NAAC accredits the institution as a whole, whereas NBA accredits individual programs. So, the NBA accreditation is at the program level. If an institute has 5 programs, each program is a separate entity for accreditation purposes by NBA. But NAAC looks at the institute as a whole, and as a totality the institute is accredited appropriately. So, NAAC accredits the institutes as a whole, unlike NBA. The eligibility for applying for NAAC is any HEI with a record of at least 2 batches of students who have graduated from that institution, or the institute has been in existence for 6 years, whichever is earlier, is eligible to apply for accreditation. NAAC considers HEIs under 3 general categories: universities, autonomous institutes, affiliated institutes. The universities could mean central universities, state universities, private universities, deemed to be institutions, institutions of national importance. All this, any of these under the category of a university would be one class. The classification purposes and reason is that the metrics, the way they are evaluated, the criteria, there are certain differences among the different categories of higher education institutions. So, we will not be discussing those in detail because anyway they are changing now. But the basic idea was that the accreditation would depend on the type of the higher education institution HEI. So, the first category was universities, the second was autonomous colleges. It could be an affiliated college, affiliated university, but is academically autonomous, or it could be the constituent college of a university. In either case, what is important is that an autonomous college is totally responsible for its own curriculum design, instruction delivery and assessment. That is, for all academic purposes, it is like a university, an autonomous institute, but the administration of it, the admissions, the declaration of the results, etc., could be under the control of the government or the university. So, academically autonomous colleges. Then the next category is affiliated colleges, that is, these are affiliated but non-autonomous. So, the curriculum design and development is the responsibility of the university. Similarly, the end semester assessment also is the responsibility of the university. So, that is the classification that NAAC adopted. As I mentioned, now it is likely to change. Any other HEI at the discretion of NAAC could be considered for accreditation purpose. NAAC revised its assessment and accreditation framework in July 2017. From 2017 to last year 2014, this framework was in vogue. Last year again it announced a change, but that is yet to take place. There is still some delay in implementing the new framework, but many features of the framework launched in 2017 still probably will be holding good. The shift in 2017 represented a dramatic paradigm shift, making the NAAC process ICT enabled, objective, transparent, scalable and robust. The present revised framework also is expected to retain all these features: very strongly ICT enabled, objective to the maximum extent possible, transparent, scalable and robust. These features continue to dictate the way the accreditation process is determined by the authorities. The shift in 2017 was, earlier to that it was mostly qualitative peer judgment. The shift was from that qualitative peer judgment to data based quantitative indicator evaluation with increased objectivity and transparency. Most of the information was sought for in a quantitative form, and this quantitative data could be automatically evaluated by a formula or a rule to determine the marks to be awarded. That would make it more objective and transparent. And another shift, as I mentioned, was towards extensive use of ICT. That would help scalability as well as robustness. Then the shift was also in terms of simplification of the process, drastic reduction in the number of questions and size of the self-study report. Like NBA uses SCR, NAAC uses a self-study report or SSR, in which the institutes provide information that is sought for, and the P team visit, when it happens, it will evaluate the qualitative criteria mentioned in the SSR. The quantitative information provided in the self-study report, as I mentioned, is automatically evaluated by the system, because it is all based on quantitative data and established formulae. Based on that, even the institute itself can work out how many marks it is to get, as long as the data is correct and valid. That also NAAC has a mechanism for an independent data verification and validation process. The shift was also towards boosting benchmarking as quality improvement tool. That is, after evaluation of all the criteria and determining the marks and all that, there was a benchmarking based on which the grades were announced. This has been attempted through comparison of NAAC indicators with those of other international quality assurance frameworks. Then it introduced the what is called system generated score, which is basically the value that one gets from the quantitative metrics. So, the data is automatically evaluated, formulas are given based on which the marks can be determined. So, it generates what is called as a system generated score, that is approximately about 70% at that time. Then what it did was that 25% of the system generated score it has put as a cutoff for pre-qualification. That is, if the system generated score is less than that, then the peer team will not visit the institution for further processing. The institute had to improve its indicators so that it touches the pre-qualifier mark. It is same as pre-visit qualifiers of NBA. Both NBA and NAAC have introduced this pre-qualifier mechanism to reduce unnecessary load on the peer teams when they visit very poorly qualified institutes where the accreditation is highly unlikely to succeed. So, they introduced this mechanism of pre-qualifiers. Then as I mentioned, because a lot of dependency is there on the quantitative metrics, NAAC introduced an element of a third party validation of data. Then it provided appropriate differences in the metrics, as we mentioned, universities, autonomous institutes, non-autonomous institutes. It provided the differences in the metrics, weightages and benchmarks between these three types of higher education institutions. For example, a university or an autonomous institute is responsible for the curriculum design and development. On the other hand, a non-autonomous institute has to simply implement the curriculum provided by the university. So, obviously, one cannot use the same metric for these purposes. A university can have a metric which tries to understand the quality issues in the curriculum design and development. But for an autonomous institute, yes, curriculum design and development still makes sense. But for a non-autonomous institute, we cannot ask for information regarding curriculum design and development, because such an institute is not responsible for curriculum design and development. We have to look at the way the institute implements the given curriculum. So, there are differences in the way metrics have to be interpreted and the information to be sought. So, the revised framework took into account all these aspects, and then it revised several metrics to bring in enhanced participation of the students and alumni in the assessment process. The accreditation was based on a criteria based framework, and they called it as quality indicator framework or QIF. QIF at that time had 7 criteria representing the core areas of functions and activities of HI. If the current revised framework, the present framework that the NAAC is proposing, not only the academic and administrative aspects of institutional functioning, but also the emerging issues have been included. Still, that has to become official, but even in the 2017 framework, they did bring in several emerging issues of that time, like for example, green initiatives, etc. Under each of the 7 criteria, certain key indicators were identified, what they are called as HEIs. Now, these key indicators were further delineated as metrics, and metrics were actually meant to elicit the responses from the HEIs, because ultimately what the institute provides as an information, either quantitative information in terms of facts and data, or qualitative information in the form of a report, ultimately what the institute provides is captured in the metrics. At the bottom, metrics is where the institution provides information. So, these metrics can be quantitative, facts and data, or qualitative, a report. The 7 criteria at that time which were to serve as the basis for assessment of HEIs were curricular aspects, teaching, learning and evaluation, research, innovation and extension, infrastructure and learning resources, student support and progression, governance, leadership and management, institutional values and best practices. These were the criteria that NAAC used till recently. Then, as noted, certain key indicators were identified under each criterion. We will not discuss all these key indicators because they are in the process of getting revised, but just to indicate the flavor, we will give a couple of examples. Criterion 1, curricular aspects. Key indicator 1.1 is curriculum design and development. As we mentioned, this key indicator is applicable only for the universities and autonomous colleges. Another example, criterion 2, teaching, learning and evaluation. Key indicator 2.4, teacher profile and quality. This key indicator is applicable to all three types of higher education institutions. However, the weightages may differ. Then each key indicator is further delineated via metrics. So, these metrics are of two types, qualitative, quantitative. Qualitative metrics require descriptive responses. A paragraph appropriate to the question must be composed and submitted by the institute. Typically, there is a limit on the length of the paragraph. For example, they may say not more than 200 words, not more than 500 words, like that. That must be strictly followed because it is checked automatically by the system. So, the qualitative metrics require descriptive responses not exceeding the specified length. Then quantitative metrics require quantifiable facts and figures as data. This data has to be provided in the specified format. They have specified for every piece of data item the specific format in which the data has to be supplied. The marks awarded were based on a given formula. Qualitative metrics are evaluated by the peer team when it visits the institute. Quantitative metrics are evaluated by the system automatically, yielding the system generated score. Information specified for each metric included the weight allocated to that metric, the data required, and in case it is a quantitative data, formula for calculating the information whenever required. Then documents that need to be uploaded, whether it is qualitative or quantitative, supporting documents that need to be uploaded from which the data could be compiled. Example of a qualitative metric 2.3.1, student centric methods such as experiential learning, participative learning and problem solving methodologies are used for enhancing learning experiences. That is what the institute claims. Now, what kind of student centric methods are adopted in the institute and what kind of experience the students get in the learning process, what kind of results these experiments have provided, all these things the institute has to describe. So, it uploads a description of the student centric methods and they specify in not more than 500 words. This is to be strictly followed. Then the marks for autonomous institute weight were 20 marks. For different institutes it will be different and this would be evaluated by the peer team when they visit the institute. Example of a quantitative metric 2.1.2, average enrollment percentage, average of last 5 years. So, data requirements for last 5 years you have to provide total number of students admitted, total number of sanctioned seats. So, the percentage per year was calculated as ratio of the students admitted to the sanctioned seats as a percentage. So, total number of students admitted by total number of sanctioned seats into 100. Then for each year we get a percentage, we form the average of the percentage for 5 years. So, average percentage for 5 years. So, percentage sum divided by 5. This was how the particular metric is calculated. Then autonomous institutes, the weight was 10 marks. Then the grading system adopted by NAAC at that time, again as I keep mentioning that is getting revised now. Grading system at that time was pre-qualifier, minimum 30% in system generated score, computed automatically based on the data for quantitative metrics. The system generated score is about 70% of the total score. Then the cumulative grade point average CGPA was calculated based on 3 components. The first component is scores obtained from SGS, system generated score. The second component were the scores from qualitative metrics critically appraised by the peer team, and the third component was the scores obtained on the student satisfaction survey. NAAC introduced this concept of a student satisfaction survey, which is conducted by a third party. It is conducted electronically, and the student mail IDs must be supplied to NAAC. The institute must supply them the mail IDs, and an independent third party would conduct the survey. Based on that, it would give certain marks. So, there are scores obtained from system generated score, scores obtained from peer team, then scores obtained from the student satisfaction survey. These 3 components will be collated through an automated procedure based on benchmarks. As we mentioned earlier, they tried to bring in the concept of a benchmarking of the quality by comparing these values with the other international standards. Then finally, the CGPA is worked out of a value of 4. Then the final grade at that time was on a 7-point scale with appropriate scores. If the score is so much, this is the grade, like that. So, they started with A++ and went all the way up to C, and D was not accredited. For each grade, what should be the range of CGPA, that was mentioned. As I mentioned, NAAC had this revised accreditation framework revised in 2017 till recently. Last year in 2024, an overarching committee with Dr. Radhakrishnan as the chairperson was set up by the Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, Government of India in 2022 for strengthening the assessment and accreditation of HEIs. They found that a large number of institutes were still not under the ambit of accreditation, and many institutes had difficulty in providing the necessary information under the accreditation norms. So, it set up a committee. There were other committees also, and this was an overarching committee. The terms of reference for this committee were to strengthen the accreditation process by NAAC, NBA, and the ranking system by NIRF. So, actually there was a accreditation process by NAAC, there was an accreditation process by NBA, and there is also a ranking framework by NIRF. Now, all these 3 ask quite often a lot of information which is similar across these requirements. So, can we strengthen the entire process? Then to recommend how more institutions could be made to come into the fold of accreditation. Then to prepare a roadmap for aligning NAAC, NBA and NIRF, National Institute Ranking Framework, to the proposed National Accreditation Council on in the as indicated in the NEP 2020. In the NEP 2020, it proposed a Higher Education Commission of India, and as a part of that they proposed a National Accreditation Council, and this was supposed to be a kind of amalgamation of the NAAC NBA requirements. So, the report of this committee on transformative reforms in accreditation was formally approved by the Ministry of Education, Government of India. Based on the recommendations of the committee, the Executive Committee of NAAC had proposed launching of reforms in 2 phases. One, binary accreditation. It introduced the concept of binary accreditation, and another was maturity based graded levels. Please refer to the NAAC website, because still it is getting updated. The institutes need to keep referring to the NAAC website for latest updates regarding the NAAC reforms, these reforms. So, in February 2025, NAAC did this communication that allow the higher education institutions in cycle 2 and above under the 2017 revised accreditation framework to retain the validity of their present grade until the basic accreditation, that is binary accreditation, and MBGL, maturity based graded levels, are launched, because at that time still the process was an ongoing process. The necessary documents were still under development. So, the NAAC decided to allow the HEIs in cycle 2 and above to retain the validity of their present grades until the basic accreditation and MBGL were launched. They may then choose either of the two. Once these two are launched, the institutes can choose basic accreditation, or if they feel confident enough, they can choose MBGL also. So, it is based on their preparedness. HEIs in cycle 1, the above is for cycle 2 and above. HEIs in cycle 1 under RAF are given the option to opt for basic accreditation. If any of the HEIs in the above categories of 1 and 2 still wish to proceed with assessment as per the existing RAF, that is 2017 framework, the peer team assessment will be carried out through an online mode for colleges and hybrid mode with online as well as physical visit in case of universities. That is what they decided. Now, the detailed processes and the standard operating procedures for online and hybrid visits will be shared with the HEIs, that has been mentioned, but still we have to wait and see. So, what are these two basic reforms, binary accreditation and MBGL? Binary accreditation, under this framework, an institute is awarded accreditation as follows. If the institution gets more than 2.00 CGPA, then the outcome will be accredited. That means, still we have the concept of criteria, the cumulative grade point average, all these things, but how actually these are computed is yet to be formalized and recorded in the NAAC website. But if the institution gets more than 2.00 CGPA, then the outcome will be accredited, binary. So, there is no question of grades like A++, A minus, B++, these kind of grades which were there earlier are done away with. Now, we have, as the name implies, binary accreditation. Accredited, then if the institution gets less than 1.50 CGPA, then the outcome will be not accredited. So, 2.0 or more accredited, less than 1.5 not accredited. In between, they introduced one more category. If the institution gets more than 1.50 CGPA, but less than 2.00 CGPA, then the outcome will be provisionally accredited. So, that will be for a period of 1 year, and the institute has to improve its abilities and competence to reach higher level of CGPA. So, that is the basic framework of binary accreditation. The next level is maturity based graded levels, or MBGL. It is a multi-tiered accreditation system introduced under NAAC's reformed framework. An institute can opt to go for maturity based graded levels if it wishes to move on a trajectory of increased maturity. As it becomes more and more capable, it can aim for higher level of quality assurance requirements, and as the level increases, the requirements also become more stringent. If the institute is prepared for it, it can go for this kind of a maturity based graded levels. NAAC assesses the maturity across parameters like governance, academic, research, innovation, infrastructure, etc. There are 5 ascending levels which are provided 1 to 5. Institutions progress upwards as they evolve. It could be in depth in their disciplines, that means it could be a narrow focused discipline wise growth, or in breadth in disciplines, multidisciplinary kind of a scenario can emerge. MBGL uses a mix of technology enabled verification, stakeholder validation and selective expert review. Most assessments are online with minimal physical visits to ensure transparency, speed and reduced subjectivity. So, the 5 levels provided by the MGBL are: level 1 is the foundational maturity, the starting level, emerging institutions. Next, higher level, level 2 is developing institutions or strengthening the institution is happening. So, institutional strengthening. Level 3, establishing institutions, excellence in core functions, that is a higher level. These 3 are at one kind of grouping. The next 2 are really more ambitious levels. Level 4 is institutions of national excellence. Then level 5, which is the highest level under the MGBL scheme, highest level, level 5 is institutions of global excellence for multidisciplinary research and education as envisioned in NAP 2020. So, NAP 2020 envisions institutions of global excellence. This is level 5. This is the highest level to which an institute can aim for getting the accreditation. The process of assessment and accreditation more or less has remained same. It is expected to remain same. The basic process is expected to continue as presently. That is, the institution has to register with NAAC, then it has to submit some preliminary information, institutional information for quality it is called. That would be the basis for determining whether the institute can proceed with the submission of the self-study report and the NAAC can proceed with processing the applications further, or whether the institute is still not really ready for accreditation. So, it is a kind of a pre-qualifier which will be brought into the picture. Then if the institute qualifies at that level, submission of the self-study report, the actual format, the metrics, processes and everything need to be yet finalized. Submission of self-study report, then a student satisfaction survey conducted by a third party, then the peer team visit which will evaluate the qualitative metrics, then all these are appropriately combined, then decision and announcement of the evaluation result. So, the basic process is expected to remain same. Then the updates in criteria and metrics, several updates have been proposed by Radhakrishnan committee. We look at some of them in the next unit. As noted earlier, the report of this committee on transformative reforms in accreditation was approved by the Ministry of Education, Government of India. Several resources on the web do indicate the new criteria and metrics based on the suggestions made in the Radhakrishnan committee report. However, still many of these things have to appear officially on the NAAC website. We will briefly look at these suggestions made by Radhakrishnan committee report in the next unit. But please refer NAAC website regularly for the official listing of the new criteria, metrics, accreditation process, formats, standard operating procedures, etc. under the transformative reforms in accreditation. So, that is the basic new framework that the NAAC is proposing. In the next unit, we will understand the proposed transformative reforms in accreditation proposed by Radhakrishnan committee report. So, that is what we will see in the next unit. Okay. Thank you. We will meet again in the next unit. Thank you.